amount of detail is incredible.
The Last of Us is a very genuine adventure.
The Last of Us takes place 20 years after a very specific outbreak happened that involves fungus.
That fungus is real. If it were to be able to infect humans, it would go like that. It's terrifying.
Viruses can make us ill, but fungi can alter our very minds.
Joel is a broken man. He is a father who has experienced loss.
I don't save Sarah's life, which is Joel's daughter, which is the event that shapes the character for the rest of his life.
A black market smuggler who's tasked with a job of transporting this 14-year-old girl named Ellie to this military group that provides hope for mankind to develop a vaccine.
When you're adapting something like a video game, changes have to be done smartly. We are telling more. There is so much in between.
Can I have a gun?
Absolutely not.
I was advised not to play the game, but I just watched some of the gameplay though, secretly.
It is going to be beautiful, terrifying, but ultimately it's enlightening.
So good. Does it justice and then some. It was only when I talked to Craig that I became extremely excited of what this adaptation might look like.
We asked Nico Parker to play an incredibly challenging part. We have to fall in love with her. And she also has to be a specific kind of person, very different than the person that Joel is going to meet later in the episode in the guise of little Ellie. It was important for us to present the audience with a Sarah that we felt we could follow for the rest of the series. She's almost the protagonist until disaster strikes. Something that Nico Parker and Pedro Pascal pulled off gorgeously.
Nico Parker, my original daughter, my Sarah, she's the person that I live for. Without her, I don't have purpose.
He's the best. I could not ask for a better on-screen dad. A lot of the time with acting, you're not always seeing what you're reading and what the audience is seeing. So a lot of the time you're kind of making up in your head, which on one hand is really amazing because you can create this whole narrative in your brain that then you get to follow through with. And on the other hand, it's like you're watching someone die and you're just staring at like a patch of grass and like, the amazing thing about Fort McCloud is it was like you could just really immerse yourself because it's all in front of you. Like any time where I was scared, I was genuinely really scared. Dad! Oh shit! And I just remember being like, oh my God.
We are not sick!
So this is how it begins. It begins with tragedy.
Which is ultimately the event that shapes the character for the rest of the show, for the rest of his life. It is the point of identity for Joel.
That kind of love, that unconditional love, is beautiful and can be very scary at the same time.
We didn't do a lot of rehearsing because I think we both kind of wanted to savor all of the passion and everything. The feeling I had after the first take of adrenaline.
The emotion there is heartbreaking, and it's ugly. The way she dies is not pretty. It's not meant to be pretty. Her death is the fulcrum point for everything.
My name is Marlene. I'm the leader of the Fireflies in the Boston QZ. I first met Marlene almost exactly 10 years ago in 2012. It was to audition for the video game. As far as the HBO series, I don't remember when I first heard about it, but when I did, I was like, Mommy, want that. Did I think that they would actually cast me? No, I didn't. The hundreds of people that work on the game make you look like Marlene, make you look like the character and turn it into a masterpiece. It's another thing to step in front of the camera and embody her with my own instrument. And I had a couple of things on my side, which was I grew into her, I aged into her a little bit, and I guess my deep passion and love for her.
As a writer, you're trying to construct a scenario where like a person is trying to avoid a fate worse than death. For Joel, it'd be losing a daughter again, and he probably would not survive that. So then how do we put him in a situation where now he has to be with this girl and he immediately tries to reject it?
You're gonna do it.
The hell we are. We don't have time for this.
Joel is a broken man, and he meets this kid.
Ellie's not a big fan of Joel when she first meets him. Their initial meeting doesn't really set them up to be the greatest of friends, but I think that's also because they're like similar personalities. They just clash, and they don't know how to relate to each other yet. Asshole.
In the final moments of this episode, Joel forgets that the girl that is standing behind him is not his daughter.
Primitive instinct takes over. He can't help but act. Something else took control of him in a similar way to how the cordyceps does, except for him, it's a version of love.
The most remarkable thing about that moment is that when Ellie watches him beating a man to death, she is activated. Earlier in the episode, when Sarah sees him killing this old woman who's infected, who he has to kill,
You killed her.
she cries.
Baby, I'm sorry.
Ellie doesn't cry. Ellie likes it. She likes the idea of somebody defending her like that, and she likes the idea of that guy being punished. And this is where you begin to see the problem, but also the deliciousness of the pairing. These two were meant to be together, but look out. Well before we ever rolled any film, we gathered together a small army of people to work on how to get the clickers right. And getting the clickers right means that people who have played the game will go, that's it. And people who haven't played the game are gonna go, oh my God. To present the clickers on screen correctly, my feeling was that we had to make 5,000 decisions exactly right. We brought Barry Gower in. Barry Gower worked on our prosthetics on Chernobyl. He's the best.
When we joined the show, we spoke to both Neil and Craig about the design for the clickers, and we started off with a lot of preliminary concept art. We were using that as a stepping stone, and even though we were creating new, refreshed versions on the same brief, we kept going back to the original designs that Neil and his team had created for the games.
Neil and I were ruthless in our pursuit.
The first time I got to see the full prosthetics, I got tears in my eyes. It looked so good, and it was so creepy and beautiful at the same time, and it captured a lot of the things we were trying to do with the game, but it was there in real life.
We found some terrific actors who were fans of the game and understood the movement, and we're really happy with how it all turned out. One of the changes that Neil and I felt we needed to make early on was the way the fungus would spread. Obviously, we did a lot of research on fungus and cordyceps. Neil and Naughty Dog, of course, had gone through a lot of that stuff as well. We started looking at something called mycelium, which are these threads that make up fungus. In the game, it spreads through biting and saliva, but it also can spread through the air, through spores. And while that works in a video game environment, in real life, spores move around everywhere. And it's just harder to buy into the notion that spores localize and don't spread.
Craig had this idea that I loved, which is just like the way fungus operates, is sometimes it's like the largest organisms you could have in the forest. It's a single organism that could just communicate to different parts of it. Like if you touch a tendril here, a mile away, you could wake up a horde of infected that will now like come after you.
Indeed, there is this thing called the wood wide web. Fungus can communicate chemically over insane distances. They are remarkable organisms, and unfortunately, in this case, also terrifying.
And that's one of those changes that we made from the game to the show. In the game, it was the military chasing us, but we felt like, just again, the way it was playing out, we couldn't sustain that. And I believe it's actually more dramatic and kind of interesting than what happens in the game.
Tess was a character that we did quite a bit of expansion on. She doesn't have any particular emotional connection to the world as far as we know. So in that regard, she's kind of a perfect survivor. Once she understands what Ellie is, and that Ellie represents some modicum of hope for the world, you see that there is something in her that was always there that is ready to come back out.
When Tess finds out that Ellie is immune, there's immediately a light bulb moment for her that goes off, which is like redemption.
I think Tess goes, if they do this one thing, that can potentially save everyone. She can in some way be redeemed for all the shitty things that she's done.
Even in getting bit and understanding that her life is going to end, she is even more committed to hope and inspires Joel to move on with Ellie for just a little bit longer.
I had imagined that the scene was going to be very different to the way that it actually turned out. I thought it was going to be much slower, and I thought it was going to be like this magnetic kind of pull. And then when we came to do it, I don't know, it was just so not what I had thought it was going to be.
Neil understands how to create fear, and it's gorgeous.
My first reaction to the episode was surprise. It was this unexpected, beautiful love story in this bleak world.
My philosophy on this show has always been, when should we deviate and when should we come back? If it's kind of the same or worse, we stay where the game is. If it's better, we deviate.
We talked about using Bill, because he's on his own, as a way to follow through time and see how things changed within the context of a man.
One of the first conversations Craig and I had about this episode was like seeing Frank. But this is probably the biggest departure between the game and the show.
We knew from the game that Bill had a partner. His partner was Frank. In the game, Frank is already dead. And I thought that there was an opportunity to go a different way.
I'm really hungry. Haven't eaten in 2 days. Doesn't sound very long out loud, does it? Bill and Frank are kind of opposites, really, in terms of the way that they kind of operate in the world. You know, Bill's super practical and not emotional, and Frank is the opposite of that. We're gonna make friends.
We don't have friends, Frank.
Bill is a sad character to me when I just envision him in the world before Frank shows up.
Frank's nature is, he's a people person. He's been able to persuade people of his value. Whereas Bill has used the other approach, which is, I have a gun and I'm pointing it at you. Unless you run away, I will kill you.
It's amazing because we get to do such contrasting scenes, sort of action kind of scenes, and then really like intimate, vulnerable scenes.
With each episode, there's a sort of reflection of where love can take you. And this was the pure, innocent version. This is the beauty that love can bring us.
The last scene is emotionally charged, but strangely enough, it's also quite perfunctory. What really is important is the not being too emotional, because I think it's better to let us be emotional. We've lived the life with them, and the point that Frank says that today is my last day, that's really about, okay, let's just go through all the things.
Just give me one more good day.
I've seen this thing 200 times, and I still cry. That's those two guys doing it to me, no question. It's remarkable. That's the dream.
When Ellie reads Joel that suicide note, Bill kind of spells out, look out for the people that you love. And he specifically mentions Tess. It's a reminder of Joel's failure. Joel has already failed to save his daughter, and now he's failed to save his romantic partner. What's next?
I think what's narratively fascinating about The Last of Us is it's a new kind of apocalypse, and the story of our compulsion to dominate.
So at the end of the third episode, we saw Joel and Ellie leaving in Bill's car, and for the first time, you got a sense that they were a team. And that theme carries through into the 4th episode. There's an uneasy truce, but they're not necessarily anything more than, as he says, cargo.
Joel? Did you know diarrhea is hereditary?
What?
Yeah. It runs in your genes. Joel secretly loves Ellie's humor and her jokes and her puns. He pretends he doesn't, but he does. I think that means a lot to Ellie that he does actually find her funny. I don't think she ever worries about annoying him. She kind of loves it.
Feel free to wait in the truck.
We decided to deviate a bit from the game. In the game, they made their way to Pittsburgh. So in looking around at possible places, we landed on Kansas City because it just felt like it was a good match for sort of what we had and where we were to shoot in Calgary.
I had an idea about which episodes that I was going to have to get my head around quite early on. There was a breakdown of various action sequences in episode 4, and thank God I had such an extraordinary team to help me.
Please help! Put your seatbelt on.
Are we gonna help him?
No.
It's quite a fun day. It's just crashing cars. It's just, that's why we got into this business.
Ellie witnessed Joel being violent at the end of the 1st episode. And this is a moment where, when they're under attack, Ellie has to trust Joel.
You see that hole? When I say go, you crawl to that wall, and you squeeze through, and you don't come out until I say.
He is this protector, he is this violent man, he's gonna take care of her. But what she encounters very quickly is how ugly that violence is. He is attacked by someone else who is going to kill him. And Ellie, who has found a gun, walks out and saves Joel through an act of violence. And Ellie is confronted by the horror of what she did and what she's capable of. Joel has an opportunity to comfort her. He doesn't. And you could see how quickly Ellie just wipes those tears away and pretends nothing happened at all because she's just like him.
This was another thing that we discussed early on. How do we personify this group? Because in the game, they were just an obstacle. How do we give them a face? And here, it would be interesting if they were more than an obstacle. They'd feel like people with a real goal and real motivation and humanity. So with the character of Kathleen, we get to see that she's this ruthless leader, and she clearly has the respect of this group that managed to take down a quarantine zone.
Find who did this. Find every collaborator and kill them all.
In the gaming world, playing Tommy was one of the unexpected joys of my career. So to be a part of that world again and see it come to life three-dimensionally is really exciting. Perry and Kathleen, they're new characters. Kathleen is the leader of the resistance, and because of Perry's past in the military, he is willing to follow her lead.
Kathleen is a tough woman. She's a very principled woman, but she definitely has a dark side.
When there is a dramatic shift in power from a repressive regime being overthrown by a revolutionary force, history is full of examples where the revolutionary force is just as bad as what was there before. And here in Melanie Lynskey, we have that embodied.
I love humanizing villains. And so much of The Last of Us is about people that have to make choices.
Joel!
And whether they're heroes or villains really depends on your perspective. The narrative function of Henry and Sam was to show a mirror image of Joel and Ellie, this brother that's almost like a father to Sam, a person that's willing to do anything to protect his brother.
Sam and Henry are another example of this duality that we encounter, who are bonded together not only because they're the only family they have left, but because they also speak a language that very few people speak.
I love that so often when we were working on this, when we had a deviation, Craig would always call me. He's like, okay, I've been thinking about Sam, and hear me out. I know it's a big change, but what if he were deaf? And it's a way that Sam has to rely on Henry even more.
They're going to help us escape.
And I said, that's so good, it makes me upset that I didn't think about it.
Leading up to getting the role, I did not know ASL.
Lamar and Bella picked up ASL in an instant.
The interpreters, the CJ and Kivon in this film, they were so willing to help anyone who wanted to learn. In the end, all the crew were signing because everyone wanted to communicate and let them know how great they were.
When we go into the sewers and we see that there was like a whole community down here that has perished, you get to appreciate how different groups survived. For fans of the game, when they see that drawing of Ish, they know this whole other story that has existed and happened in this world. In a game, you could pick up notes and read them. It's one of those few moments of pure innocence when you're seeing them laugh. That's very rare in this world.
Sam definitely does bring out a childlike energy in Ellie, and I think that naturally came just through working with Kivon. Endure and survive. Yeah, man.
Keep it down, we're not out yet.
You know, I wasn't exactly telling you the truth before.
He's responsible for Kathleen's brother's death because he was saving his own brother. And so, my brother's more important than your brother. These are decisions that love makes, not rationality.
I know why you did what you did, but did you ever stop to think that maybe he was supposed to die?
He's just a fucking kid.
How many people will you sacrifice? How many people will you burn to protect the one you love?
Kathleen would say her absolute moral code is one of her strengths. I think it's one of her weaknesses. You need to have empathy for the positions that people are in.
In a world where everything's falling apart, you latch on to the things that you can to stay sane.
For a show that has monsters in it, we don't have a lot of monsters because there's no gameplay when you're watching a show. But I wanted people to feel for the first time just how humanity lost. Because look at what's pouring up out of the ground.
When it came to the infected, we realized that we had the largest amount of infected that we've ever had in the show so far. So we got in contact with Terry Notary, who does a lot of work with movement on the Planet of the Apes movies. He set up a special infected boot camp with stunt and movement people.
When you have a human being playing these characters, you really get the subtleties that it's so hard for animators, it takes them forever to recreate it.
We have everything from a swarm of infected to clickers. There's a bloater.
Stop!
Kathleen was killed by a child clicker. She was warned about a danger lurking in a basement. She turned away from it because she just wanted to chase after Henry and make sure she got vengeance. Maybe it's for the best. I don't think she's a person who could have found peace.
You think they'll be okay?
It's easier when you're a kid anyway.
Neil's story made it very clear that you cannot escape fate in this regard. And that in fact, the more ruin and hurt you cause to protect this person, the more brutal it will be when you lose anyway.
The scene where Ellie tries to heal Sam with her blood, to her, it was her chance to be this hero that she'd been promised that she was. And she was so desperate, because also the relationship that she'd built with Sam.
It was really tough for me to film the scene in this room. Sam is so important to Henry. Once he lost Sam, Henry felt as though there wasn't much to live for.
What did I do?
And I think it really affects Joel and Ellie moving forward in the story.
This is where Joel is beginning to understand what's happening inside him, because it's been 20 years since there was anybody in his life like a Sam that would ruin him if he were to lose them. And he doesn't quite know how it happened, but it has begun to happen now with Ellie. When he sees what happens here, all he can think is, that's going to be her and me. And it terrifies him. Trying to save somebody and then failing is a terrible feeling. And it is, in fact, the feeling that Joel finds himself soaking in now, every day, because he's panicked that it's going to happen to him again. He can handle being shot at, he can handle being punched, kicked. What he cannot possibly fathom is going through the experience of losing his child again, and that's what Ellie is becoming to him.
Ellie doesn't make relationships easily, mainly because the relationships she has built have been cruelly taken away from her. That's where Joel and her are the same.
What's incredible was to be able to explore things that I think are very much a part of the experience of the game, but you can expand on.
You're not gonna scare us.
Scared him?
One of those things is the internal life of these characters.
With the show, there was this addition of like, he's having a physical reaction to that. He can't breathe, his chest hurts. It's a combination of his age, but also all the events that have just happened.
Are you dying?
And his connection to Ellie. He's just so scared. And Ellie doesn't quite understand what's happening with him. Joel just feels like he needs to save everyone around him. Joel has this goal where he thinks he needs to go save his brother. And then he arrives in Jackson. Not only does he not need to save his brother is thriving.
This place actually fucking works.
When we were in Canmore filming, just the little town of Jackson, I was just like, there's the bank, there's the studio, lights. I was like, they got everything. They got all we need. It just makes my job easier because I could just really come onto set and be.
Imagine going to a town and being able to put in like a half-acre stables with sheep and horses and cows and all of that stuff. My favorite part of that was building the paddock and the stables and everything in the parking lot right in the middle of town.
Hey, Joel, check it.
When we go into these places, we're not doing anything small. We spend quite a bit of time there. And if there's one business on a street that we want to film on that doesn't want to play ball, we're out of luck. Fortunately, we've had everyone accommodate us everywhere we went.
Jackson, it's this beautiful community. It's the closest some group has come to the world that we know, the world that we live in, that they could watch movies, that they could celebrate Christmas.
I'm sorry about your kids.
It's okay. And kid, just Kevin. Sarah was Joel's daughter.
There's this beautiful moment where Joel stumbles outside and he thinks he sees his daughter. We love the idea that for a moment he would think, just for a moment, and then he would see her with her daughter and he would think, that's what I would have.
We always try to keep her spirit in the scene. I think it's always a ghost in the room between Joel and Tommy.
I'm failing in my sleep. It's all I do. It's all I've ever done. It's failure.
Anybody who's like grieving or who've lost a child, everybody goes through that path differently. With Maria, I think she poured into the people because that's what she had. And I think Joel kind of just imploded. Like, I just feel like he just went into himself. But it is different to see how Maria and Joel both handle those losses very, 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 very differently.
I've lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
And that scene is perhaps the most famous scene from the game. We did it almost exactly. We changed a few things here and there. The general execution of it was something that I thought was important we stick to exactly.
Everybody I have cared for has either died or left me. Everybody fucking except for you! Me and Pedro, both of us really felt the pressure of that. And when you feel too pressured in something, when you've created that for yourself, it can be hard to perform how you want to. Yeah, no, I had sleepless nights over that scene.
I didn't envy them, so trying to like do a scene that like exists in the game and is like seared into people's mind, and they made it their own, and it's just as beautiful.
Ellie admits she's afraid and that he makes her less afraid. And what Joel doesn't know how to tell her is she makes him more afraid. That when you care about something or someone, that's when the fear happens.
Joel? Joel, no, shit! Ellie's biggest fear is definitely ending up alone. Joel, open your eyes. Open your eyes. I can't fucking do this without you. Please.
At the end of episode 6, Joel appears to be dying. When we return to find him with Ellie, he is in terrible shape. And in fact is telling her to leave him because he's not gonna make it. Ellie has to make that decision. In the moment she hesitates, we are brought back in time to an Ellie we have not met.
We get to see what is it like to be a kid in this world before you get thrust on this crazy journey or find out you're immune to the cordyceps. You're just a kid in a military school that feels like she doesn't belong. She has no connection with anybody else except for this one girl that left her and she thought was dead because she was gone for so long.
Are you okay?
I'm fine. I just ran away for a bit, that's all.
If you're going through some shit, you're supposed to, I don't know, talk to your best friend about it. Riley is Ellie's only friend, really, in the QZ zone. She also has quite a big crush on her. Their bond and their relationship is very real and pure and fun. They have a really interesting dynamic, and I loved working with Storm to create that.
Riley is played by Storm Reed. We had to find somebody that was able to not only be on Bella's level in terms of talent, but also somebody that we think would have the upper hand on Ellie, and that's a tall order.
Turn right, open the door, tell me when you're there. Go.
Fine.
This is Riley's one last chance to show her love and appreciation before she goes away.
Are you there? I'm here. Now what?
The metaphor for this episode was, what is it like to skip school in the post-apocalypse? And you get to see them play an arcade game. Imagine like an arcade game that Ellie has a poster of in her room. She probably read about in some old video game magazine they found. They've probably like seen the moves, and here they get to do it. Riley gifts that to her.
Go again? Goddamn right. It was so much fun to film. It was crazy, very full on. And those days were long and emotional and taxing, but honestly, they're so rewarding and so satisfying.
It's really cool to just walk around and admire the work that people do. The authenticity of what the world looks like or what the mall looks like, they did an amazing job.
The mall was, I think, one of the most amazing sets. We had to get a carousel, we had to do a Halloween store, we had to do a Victoria's Secret store.
What?
Nothing, I was just trying to imagine you wearing that.
Shut up!
Riley is kind of testing out the waters and seeing how Ellie feels, and she has a little crush on her, so it's kind of like a date, but not really.
In that world, to have a crush on someone, it's still like a feeling that you can't just turn it off because the apocalypse is going on and you don't think you have a future together. Like, it's something that's still very much there.
In this world, it's often the case that the happiest moments are interrupted by the worst moments. And there's this wonderful moment where Ellie realizes that Riley feels the same way about her that she feels about Riley, and they kiss.
Ellie gets to experience first love, first kiss, and then we snatch it away from her.
They're attacked and they are both infected. And they believe, quite certainly, that they are both going to die or turn into a monster.
No!
Where Ellie turns dark and violent, smashing the store up and screaming and just furious, Riley is quiet because Riley has experienced loss. The Ellie we're seeing now has never experienced loss. And Riley does say, we're all going to the same place.
Some of us just get there faster than others.
But we don't quit on the time we have together.
And then cutting that with Joel when he tells Ellie, leave me, and he pushes her away. But that memory is ringing in Ellie's ears, and she knows that she's gonna fight to the bitter end, because the person she loves the most now in this world is Joel, and she'll go to any length to save him.
Ellie is thinking about Riley, and she's thinking about the fact that Riley didn't quit on her, Riley didn't walk away, Riley didn't let Ellie kill herself, and Ellie's not walking away from Joel. And she walks right back down there and she says, I'm going to keep this moment for as long as I can, For as long as I have you, I'm with you.
In this episode, David captures Ellie, and you see Joel is slowly recovering because Ellie was able to get him medicine, and you're waiting for him to do the traditional hero thing, which he's gonna burst through the door, he's gonna kill David, he's gonna save Ellie, and then they can continue on the journey. Ow! And we wanted none of that.
We think of it as our cold episode. That one was really cold. And it needed to be, because the episode in many ways is about deprivation.
Shooting in February in Calgary was freezing. Obviously also holding a freaking rifle up, so like a 5-minute scene was tricky.
And there was 3 or 4 house-size wind machines that were just pummeling me with snow. Yeah, so that was hard.
You thirsty?
So we find ourselves in this darkest place with the darkest version of Joel. And Ellie is forced to survive on her own.
This sequence is the thing that inspired me or like made me want to make the game. So in the game, at this point, you play as Ellie. And it's this really wonderful moment when you watch people play it because they almost always say, oh my God, I'm Ellie.
You're quite a hunter. We didn't even hear you coming.
Turn around and walk away. She is prickly and doesn't trust anybody. Naturally, she obviously isn't going to trust a random guy and his buddy in the middle of a snowy forest.
What do you need? We have boots.
Medicine? Like for infections.
We do.
David presents as the good dad. And we begin to wonder if maybe she has met the one good person out there. We, of course, see fairly early on that there's also a very dark part of David.
We bring her back with us.
I'm gonna lead them away from you. But if anybody makes it down here, you fucking kill them. You got it?
When he captures Ellie,
3, 2, 1, action!
we are all meant to feel hopeless, because it is hopeless for her. And we also come to understand 2 things that maybe weren't immediately clear. One is that David is a bad father, in a terrible bad way. And the other is that these people that Ellie finds herself amongst have been eating their own dead.
You're gonna chop me up into little pieces.
I'd rather not.
Really, what he'd like is for her to be his little minion, his little wife. Once Ellie begins to realize that, the relationship becomes a lot more tense and a lot more scary and a lot more dangerous.
You're a natural leader. You're smart, loyal, violent.
She's surprised by the accusation.
You don't know anything about me.
She has no choice but to recognize some truth in that. And certainly David believes he's about to turn her.
You have a violent heart, and I should know. I've always had a violent heart.
David says something to her that's absolutely true, because he sees it in her, because he knows it's in him. He says, you have a violent heart.
Ow! Ow! Ow!
And that is something that Neil and I talked about quite a bit. It's not in the game, that line. As much as we love her, we also have to be a little scared of her.
Tell them that Ellie is a little girl who broke her fucking finger!
The sun part, you were lying down and you hit.
Yes.
I don't remember if you...
I went up a little like this, but I did that.
My connection to this story and really this world is a little bit more unique than others. The sawmill scene exists in the game to endear David to Ellie and to see this come to life in a completely different way. It's been a mind trip, man. It really has been.
Top mark. And action.
Please don't! You had your chance! Don't! I'm infected!
No. Playing any character is an upgrade from what I thought I was going to be able to do. I thought I was going to be like a clicker. Ellie gets to demonstrate this incredible moment of, intellect and resilience and also just ferocious violence. And she plants that cleaver right here. And I slam up against the wall and I slump up against this thing and I slide down. And I was like, that looks awesome.
Ellie! You don't know how good I am!
We see Joel coming to help her, and we are rooting for Joel to save her, but that's not gonna get it done. In the end, the only person who can save Ellie is Ellie. And how? Violence.
It scars her in a way that forever changes her.
No! Get off of me!
In a way, Joel saves her, but more emotionally. She's just so broken, and she doesn't know what to say, and she's covered in blood. And then she just looks him right in the eye, and she leans forward and hugs him.
Okay. It's okay, baby girl.
And all he can say is this thing that he hasn't said in 20 years, which is baby girl, which is what he called his daughter.
At the end of this story, you can see something snap in her. And the question is it permanent, or can she find her way back?
The thought experiment for the whole story is the unconditional love a parent feels for the child. And how far can you take the story to demonstrate what that means?
It is not just about the beautiful parts of love. It's also about the dark side. It's about how everything wonderful and everything bad ultimately can start with love.
Set and action.
It's me!
Here we are at the end, and we go all the way to the very, very beginning of Ellie, which is her mother, Anna, played by Ashley Johnson, who is the true beginning of Ellie because Ashley played Ellie in the game. And Ashley is spectacular here.
It sort of brings the story around to meeting Ellie for the first time and how she was first brought into this world. And there was a special level of it for me to play the mother of this character that I care so deeply about. It was the first time I've ever had to do a giving birth scene, and it was an incredible day. You're dealing with real babies, which that is usually hard, but they connected so well, and it shows how strong Ellie is, of where she came from and what she had to go through, and that even her mother had such a fight to live.
By this point, watching the series, if you've played the game, you have a new Ellie in your mind. And I need to understand why she is immune, but I also need to understand how much she was loved. And there's this genetic connecting between the two Ellies that we know. And this moment connects them together.
Anna and Marlene have gone through this whole journey of this pandemic together and finally realized that connection when Marlene walks into the room and sees Anna in the state that she's in.
I don't know if I can talk about this scene without crying. They're fictional characters, but I do think that a wonderful gift of the series is seeing these two best friends' final words to each other in those last moments of Anna's last breaths.
Her name is Ellie.
We know what that is when we cannot save the people that we love. To feel powerless. And Marlene certainly does in that moment, because Ellie is the child of her best friend since childhood, who she had to execute.
It's something that Neil told me about early on, and it made my jaw drop, and I said, we must do that. And that's how we begin our final episode. There's this moment, and we really just follow the game here very closely because it's so beautiful, where they encounter a giraffe.
It's a joyful moment for Ellie and for Joel, seeing Ellie finally be a glimmer of who she used to be after the trauma that she faced. Everything that she'd experienced hasn't just gone away. It's just this moment of beauty, so precious it's almost sad. But then from speaking to Craig, I realized it was just living the truth of it, which was, it was bittersweet, but still so, so beautiful. So fucking cool.
There's just a moment of awe and wonder in this world still. And the beauty of it is such that we understand why the ice melts between them. He's still trying to keep her with him and saying, we don't have to keep going. Let me just take you back with me. And she's saying, no, we have to go out and finish it.
We finished what we started.
I get emotional just thinking about it because it's their closest moment where Joel finally tells her the true story about how he got his scar. And it was not because some guy shot at him, it's because he tried to kill himself and he missed. But he's glad he did. And she thinks she understands the lesson here, which is you'll get over this. He lost a daughter, he was crushed, he wanted to end his own life, he didn't.
So time heals all wounds, I guess.
It wasn't time that did it.
In the hospital, Marlene quickly realizes this is not the Joel she knew because he has an emotional connection to Ellie.
You take me to her right now!
It's about the way we treasure the people that we love more than everyone else. How love leads to emotions that can rage out of control.
We've seen Joel kill. We've seen him lose loved ones. So how do you take that any further? What if it's between saving all of humanity or this one girl? It's the easiest choice he's ever made in his life.
What would make one choose one thing over the survival of humanity, essentially? Which is something that he does because he finds himself incapable of losing again.
I won't let you take her.
Unhook her.
Move!
Turn around.
Can't keep her safe forever. No matter how hard you try, no matter how many people you kill.
The parking garage is the last shot. It's the last opportunity to save what Ellie can gift the world. Joel, he is wrestling with his grief, and he can't see past it.
There was no limit to how much we could try to understand that, how much we could defend it or judge it. And it's this beautiful shadow that one can explore and question, find the horror and the humanity of.
This whole journey, we've been working towards this trust that is forming between these two characters and how honest they are with each other and how much they learn to rely on each other. And then Joel puts all of that on the line. Like a parent, you feel like you need to lie to your children to protect them. And that's what Joel does at the very end.
She knows deep down that he's not telling the truth, but she can't let herself believe it because it's too painful and it's too scary, the idea that her only purpose in life hasn't been fulfilled, that had been taken away from her by the person that she loves and trusts the most. It's too overwhelming. So she forces herself to believe Joel. Swear to me that everything you said about the Fireflies is true.
I swear.
Time doesn't really heal anything. It just makes it fade. But people heal things. And in that moment, you understand the depth of what she means to him. And the horror of it all is that that's why the ending has to be the way it is. The ending is something that people have been arguing about for over a decade. Should Joel have done what he did? And a lot of people will say no, and a lot of people will say yes. In the end, the only thing we can be sure of is that we understand why he did it, and we understand that Ellie would not have wanted him to do it. That complexity is why The Last of Us as a narrative is so gorgeous. It's why it's the most beautiful story told in the entire genre of video games. It's why Neil is a genius, and it's why I wanted to make the show in the first place.